Hello everybody and welcome to the very first edition of Dan Explores Anime. Now, why anime specifically? Well, every movie fan, everybody, as much as you love movies and watch movies, there's always some places where you think that you could explore a little more. Two of those areas for me have always been animation and international film. And one of the places where those two circles join is the world of anime. I know literally next to nothing about anime. I've seen no anime. I don't really know much about the world of anime, and so many people that I know, that I respect, that I've worked with, that are fans of the channel, that I've heard from you here on YouTube and on social media have said, like, Dan, anime is so great, you gotta get into it, I think you'd love it. So I finally made the commitment not just to start watching anime, but to explore it here on the channel with you. And this is an area where most of you, or at least a lot of you, are gonna be light years ahead of me. So when I was thinking about where to start in the world of anime, because it's very intimidating, the one place that I kept coming back to are the films of Studio Ghibli. They've been recommended to me so many times over the years that I really just wanted to fill those in because I hear that they're great movies and it's a great entry point for what I'm doing and for this series. I am excited to find these movies, to discuss them. I'm going to try to watch all of them. Some of them will have their own videos. I may combine some of them in one video if I feel like that's the way to go. But this has already been so much fun to explore, and I look forward to doing even more of this exploration with you as we do this together. So, to get to the film at hand, My Neighbor Totoro, my first exploration and my first experience with Studio Ghibli and director Hayao Miyazaki. I feel like it puts my relationship with these films on a very good footing because I found this to be a very beautiful film, first and foremost, a great story. A lot of times animation gets pegged as kids' movies, and kids would definitely love this movie. Families would love this movie, but it's really just a great movie overall. Now, if you're like me and you haven't seen My Neighbor Totoro, it's about two young girls who move to a new house in the country with their father that's also near their sick mother who's in the hospital. Together, the two girls discover a world of magical creatures in the forest around their house as they wait for their mother to return home. One of the things that really struck me the most is the way that the film captures this childlike innocence and the childlike presence of its two main characters, Satsuki and Mei. And just animating the way that they move, these little touches like Satsuki walking around on her knees like a child will do, or Mei staring at the crack in the wall, waiting for the soot sprites or the dust bunnies, depending on which version you're watching, which I'll get to later, waiting for them to make an appearance. It so captures and really exhibits the fact that these animators are not only good observational artists, but can translate those observations into funny or affecting or touching animation. So I really found that to be a very beautiful part of the film. Another reason I'm glad we started with this film is that when you're talking about animation or really films in general, I think a lot of times you expect bigger stakes than this movie delivers. As they're trying to get to their mother, you're expecting, because you've been conditioned to expect, largely from Hollywood films, from American films, these giant stakes, these giant life or death stakes. It felt like it kept building up to this big tragedy that never actually happened, but I didn't feel cheated. I didn't feel like that was a waste of time. I felt like this was a way to move the story along, and really this is about a wonder and excitement and confusion about growing up, so many different strong thematic elements that you don't need to get lost in all of these layers of plot. And so I feel like I know a little bit more about what to expect thematically from a lot of these Studio Ghibli films going forward. I also love the way that the movie leaves it up to the audience to determine some things. You don't know with these two young girls, are these things, are these creatures, are they real? Are they part of their imagination? The movie certainly indicates generally one way over the other, but I like that there's never a concrete answer to every specific incident in this film because, again, it is much more tonal and it is much more about the experience of growing up and the feeling of growing up instead of answering specific questions that are raised by the plot. One thing that I was told about Studio Ghibli is that the animation itself is beautiful, and that is 100% on point. One of the things I like the most about it, in addition to capturing the behavior of the characters, it's just the attention to detail, the way that a bike will pass under the shadow of a tree. That's a difficult thing to animate. Or even dirt on May's knees as she's been crawling around and playing. These are the details that make the world feel lived in, that make it feel real, that give it the grounding that it needs to sell the fantastical elements that you're going to introduce later on in the film. And then the animation itself, the giant tree growing and the way that the different limbs sprout and become almost real, actual trees and then form this even bigger tree. It's so beautiful, and there's a craftsmanship to it that you don't see. You just don't feel it in a lot of modern films because a lot of that animation is done on a computer. And that's not to say that computer animation isn't in its own right beautiful. It's just a different style. There is a feeling that you get from hand-drawn animation that really impressed me. And tonally, what I liked is that it's a movie that's not afraid of stillness. And I talked about the difference between a kid's movie and an animated film. This is a movie that children can enjoy, but it's also a movie that feels like it was made for everyone. And part of it is the fact that it's not afraid to take a minute, to take a breath. I liked the stillness. I liked the times when the movie took a break to just allow us to drink in this world, because it's a very beautiful world. One thing I'm really interested to track as I go through these films, not just from Studio Ghibli, but from anime in general, is both how they were influenced by films that came before them and the influence that they had on other films that came after them. As far as films that maybe had an influence on this movie, I felt like there was maybe not a direct influence, but a tonal similarity, particularly in the sequence where the two girls are waiting and the cat bus comes along for the first time. Whether it was intentional or not, it felt very similar to Close Encounters of the Third Kind to me, in that you have a very still moment, a very quiet moment. Then a very fantastical encounter, in this case the cat bus, in the case of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the UFO. And then you see the world return to that stillness. And I think that is, perhaps that's just the universal language of film, or perhaps Miyazaki and the team behind the film drew inspiration from the Spielberg film in that moment. As far as what movies it influenced, there was one image in particular. I've seen a lot of the references between Christopher Nolan's Inception and the film Paprika, which I have not seen, but perhaps will be a future installment on this show. But there is the image of Totoro's top thing that he floats on, that they all float on. Again, I'm not saying that's a direct influence. I just think that those are two very similar images, and it does make you wonder where these different films float in film history and how they all influence one another, because that's what film is. It's just a big collage, and you draw influence from other films draw influence from you, and tracing those connections, I think, is one of the great things about watching film and being a critic and taking notes or just drinking everything in, is to see these connections between movies that you love. So I look forward to drawing even more of those lines in the future as I watch so many of these very influential anime films. Another standout element for me, and I've noticed that he has scored several other Studio Ghibli films, was the music of Joe Hisaishi. Gorgeous score, and I look forward to hearing more of his work as we go along, because I felt like it placed it very much in the era where it was made, which was the late 1980s originally when it was released in Japan. However, it also had a very timeless, ethereal quality, so I look forward to hearing more Joe Hisaishi's music, and I'm sure those of you that have already seen these films are nodding at home, because if his other scores are anything like these, then I'm sure they're equally beautiful. One scattered note, somebody told me that they felt like the girl's father, Tatsuo, looked like the anime version of me. Which I don't know. I don't know necessarily if that's true. I wish I had that very luscious head of hair that he had. But is that the truth? I will let you decide. That's up to you to decide. So before I leave, there was one issue that I actually put out to my Twitter followers and got a literal, the definition of a split decision on. Because I am new to anime and because I've heard, particularly with the Studio Ghibli films, that dubbed anime often is done well, often is not done well at all. I asked my Twitter followers, should I watch these films with subtitles or should I watch them dubbed? And the response I got back was literally 50% saying subtitled, and then 50% saying either watch them dubbed or you can watch them either way, which didn't bring me a whole lot of clarity, but I know just from being around and hearing these conversations before that this is a very divisive issue with fans of anime. So with this film and with the films going forward, I decided to watch them both ways. So I watched My Neighbor Totoro subtitled, and I watched My Neighbor Totoro dubbed. It was the 2005 Disney dub, and I've heard that these dubs are actually pretty good as far as anime dubs go. Now, I watched the dubbed version first, followed by the subtitled version, and I found myself split. I think that there are very appealing elements to both versions. For example, in the dubbed version, I felt like particularly some of the performances, particularly Tim Daly's performance as the father.
You must have met one of the spirits of the forest. That means you're a very lucky girl.
And then Frank Welker's voice work. I really enjoyed those a lot. I enjoyed the warmth that Tim Daly brought to the role of the girl's father. And then Frank Welker is just a legendary voice performer, and I enjoyed his performances as the various creatures in the film. So I leaned a little bit that way when it came for the dubbed version. However, when you're going to a subtitled version, which is the original Japanese language version, I felt like I enjoyed the music in the film, particularly the songs that open and close the film. I enjoyed those more in the subtitled version. In general, there is something to hearing a film in the language in which it was intended, in the language in which it was recorded and produced, that you can't replicate when you're dubbing over something. And usually, it's not even a question for me because I don't think that I would watch a dubbed version of a movie like Parasite or a dubbed version of a movie like Cinema Paradiso. I prefer to hear it and see it in the original language. But because this is animation, and also largely because a lot of these dubbed versions were done under the supervision of Studio Ghibli and were done with stellar voice casts, particularly ones that were overseen by Disney, I did find myself really torn. And there were some interesting differences between the two. As I mentioned, the soot sprites, as they're called in the dubbed version, are called dust bunnies in the subtitled version. So you see these small little changes in language, changes in how things are communicated. I would say that if I were forced to make a choice, and I think it's because I am where I am in this anime journey, which is at the very beginning, there is an energy and a tenor and a tone to the performances, particularly of the two main girls, Satsuki and Mei, in the original Japanese language version, that for somebody who's new to anime is a little more vivacious, a little more vibrant perhaps than I am used to in an animated film. And that's not a fault with the movie, that's a difference in style.
No! You want her to die, May? Is that what you want? No! You're such a baby. Just grow up. やだー! じゃあお母さんが死んじゃってもいいのね? やだー! メイのバカ! もう知らない!
So if somebody were to come to me and say, I've never seen any anime and I'm watching My Neighbor Totoro for the first time, which one would you recommend watching? I would say maybe start with the dubbed version, but I'm not going to say that it's better. They are two different experiences, but I think the dubbed version, at least for me, it made it a little easier for me to jump into this style and jump into this world. But I'm not going to watch one exclusively over the other, and I'm sure that there are cases where the subbed is better than the dubbed, and maybe a couple of cases where the dubbed is better than the subbed. So this is something that I am going to continue to revisit as I watch the films and as I continue to grow and explore everything that anime has to offer. So my big takeaways coming out of the film, I am very excited to continue journeying into Studio Ghibli, into Hayao Miyazaki's filmography, and I don't know exactly which one I'm going to go into next. I want to stay roughly, if not exactly in order. I want to keep the eras together, so I might go to Grave of the Fireflies next. I'm not really sure where I'm going to go, but I am very excited, whatever that step may be, to finally see these films that I've heard are so great for so long, because even just this first experience with My Neighbor Totoro, it is already a beautiful, just a wonderful piece of animation. And I'm going to be building a list of anime films to watch after I get through Studio Ghibli. I would love your recommendations. Which ones are the must-sees? There are so many movies, like Akira, that I've never seen, a massively influential one, and Ghost in the Shell. So many anime films, so many different things to explore, and we have a long road, or at least I have a long road ahead of me, but I'm anxious to take this journey with you, and for you to share the insights that you've probably gleaned from many years more of seeing these films and television series than I have, bringing that to the table so we can have a great discussion. So, that's the first step on my anime journey as I explore anime. I can't wait to do even more of that with you. Be sure to hit subscribe, like, and share, all that fun stuff. Bring others on this anime journey, this anime exploration. And if you want to join in even more fun, you can check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We do so much fun stuff over there. And these are just a few of the amazing producer level patrons who help me keep things going. It is such an awesome and amazing and supportive community. And these are just a few of the amazing patrons that have kept, really helped me launch everything that I'm doing. So thank you to them, and thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next step as Dan explores anime, and I'll see you next time.